Okay, this is a meeting of the Municipal Audit Committee, September 10, 2018. We are noticed from 1 to 2 p.m. And I think everybody has an agenda, and no one is here so far for public comment, so let's go ahead and start with Barbara. Identify ourselves for the record.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk, and I'm the staff to the Audit Committee until our new budget analyst gets up to speed.
Tammy Clayton, the Controller for the municipality.
Joy Mariner, I'm a partner at BDO.
Bill Falsey, I'm the Municipal Manager.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Felix Rivera. Scott Payton, Internal Audit.
Mike Chadwick, Internal Audit.
Okay, thank you. So we have two items actually on the agenda, 2 introductions and a status report on the 2017 CAFR. And at this point, I'll go ahead and turn the meeting over to you, Ms. Clayton.
Thank you. Joy Mariner, we're having a transitioning partner on the Munis audit. That said, though, Joy is not new to the municipality. She actually started as the manager on the Munis audit 10 years ago, and she's currently the partner on the utilities. So she is very familiar with the municipality. She's been with BDO 16 years, and she teaches at national conferences on audit issues.
Ms. Mariner, would you like to say anything to further introduce yourself?
So, yeah, and I appreciate the introduction, Tammy. Unfortunately, Leah Patton is leaving our firm at the end of this month. So we're experiencing a transition as well as the municipality. And, I think from my perspective, I've always kind of been a second partner in some capacity, whether it's been just on the utilities, but also just being abreast of what's going on here at the municipality. I think it's really important for you guys to know that we've always had the staff and the qualifications to do that. I'm the lead audit on Kenai Borough and Matsu Borough, so pretty familiar with large municipal audits. And then I serve as kind of a second reviewer on some of our municipalities outside of Anchorage that are handled by other offices. So pretty familiar with just our governmental methodology. With SAP, I have been more involved, I guess, in some of the nuances of the IT system conversion and that kind of thing as it relates to AWO and MRP. More specifically, last fall, and we were going through the process. So I feel really comfortable with that. We have a really good national team that comes behind us, what we call an engagement quality control review. So we do have an external to our office engagement quality control process that helps me feel really comfortable that we're doing things consistent with the way things are done on a national level for governmental type of audits. But it is a big transition. Ideally, Leah would have been here through the issuance of this year's audit, because now I'm getting comfortable with everything that's been done to date on the CAFR. But unfortunately, with the timing of the audit and getting things complete, we're not ready to issue before Leah leaves. So I'm going to step into that role. It should be seamless to the Muni. I've already been through a lot of the work paper documentation and what's the plan and everything. So then just really getting comfortable with the things that haven't yet been completed, so that we can issue the reports just as quickly as we can. But any questions for me about qualifications or process or any of that? And for Barbara, I do have a formal letter, because your contract says I have to formally inform you about that, but I do have a formal letter so that we're in compliance with our contract provisions as well. Okay. Questions for me or concerns?
Anybody have any questions? Welcome back.
Thank you.
And, so you mentioned you have been involved in audits for the last 17, 18 years for BDO.
So BDO, I started with McCutcheon Cottrell back in 2002, and I actually came from the Federal Reserve from a banking background, so from an investments and finance background, really. And when I moved to Alaska, my husband's Alaskan, born and raised, and so there's no Federal Reserve here. So when I moved up here, I joined BDO because I thought, better to get my CPA license than have to pay somebody to get my MBA license. So here I am. And so, yeah, I believe we started doing the municipalities audit 10 years ago, and I was the lead manager on that engagement when we started the audit. And then, kind of as I moved up and other people stepped in, I stepped back from the audit. Although I've always been a consulting review, kind of a subject matter expert on the utility side, just to make sure that those reports are sufficiently reported, that all the information, and also working with the teams to help them with the audit methodology on the utilities. But McCutcheon Control joined BDO 5 years ago. So we've been with BDO for 5 years, but I've been in our office for just over 16 years.
Thank you. Comments or questions from anybody? Okay. Thank you again.
Yep.
Okay, at this time I'll introduce our new CFO who's starting his second week, Alex
Slivka.
And I'll let Alex tell you about himself and his background.
So in Alaska since '97, worked at McKinley that whole time. Do a lot of community work outside of the work I do with McKinley, which is an institutional asset manager, including 6 years on the Investment Advisory Commission for the Muni, including the last 2 as chair. Currently chair of the University of Alaska Foundation. I am past chair of the Alaska Community Foundation. I chair the EX Settlement Trust Corp. I have chaired McKinley's 401k committee for the last 10 years. I've done a lot of volunteer work with Covenant House over the last 20 years as well. And really looking forward to the opportunity to really help the municipality. They've got many projects that they are trying to work through over the next several years, and I'm looking forward to being able to support them to do that. I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions at the point? Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So how do, welcome Alex.
Thanks.
How do you understand what your relationship will be with the SAP project compared to the previous CFO?
The current structure is that the municipality has hired a person, Susie Marshall, to supervise IT, including that project. Having said that, SAP is integral to what happens in finance, so I'm going to do everything I can to help try and get this process through to its complete functionality so it can do the job it's designed to do. So probably a big supporting role, since it, as I understand it, being my second week on the job, is the probable contributing factor to why the CAFR is not yet done.
Do you know if you will still be an executive sponsor or if it will be structured that way? I know since we're moving out of the transitional period and into stabilization, that structure may not continue. Or maybe Mr. Falsey knows.
I think at this point the persons who have the greatest insight into that are Ona and Susie. But I think Alex has correctly described it, that as part of this ongoing budget process, when the Assembly sees the budget we proposed for 2019, there will be a reorganization. Susie Marshall will take the IT, SAP, GIS, the sort of technical functions. How the terminology works on executive sponsors or whatnot, I'm actually not sure.
Okay, thank you. And I understand we'll have more of an opportunity to talk with you further at next week's budget meeting.
Correct.
As well. So, any questions from anybody or comments? Welcome.
Thank you.
Look forward to working with both of you.
Okay.
Madam Chair and Mr. Rivera, as an update to the status of the December 31st CAFR, it's obviously not done. And we seem to continually be running into problems that's going to delay the process further. Last week, it was discovered that there was a new development in the way that IGC's intergovernmental costs were allocated for public works. And what that did is it saw it as an expense, so it recorded it as revenue in the general fund, which is a further problem. So we've had to go back, and the utilities have had to go back and reverse FERC, and then Maryland in O&B is reversing the IGCs and redoing them. So the funds that it's going to affect is the general fund and three capital project funds. So we're not sure. She's working on that today, so we have that. We're still having some issues with fixed assets, specifically with construction work in progress, and the reconciliation of that. Also, there's a big kind of cloud out there. Then I was going to say SAP, but it really is SAP, in that there's a question on whether it was going to be capitalized 10-1 or in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And we're completing an analysis of that. We have almost all the information except from 2 areas on all the modules. The information we requested was basically a percentage of what each module was functioning at, like it was 50% functioning or whatever, as of 10-1, as of 12/31, and then as of 6/1. And that'll help us determine when it's going to be capitalized. Now, if it is capitalized 10-1, the further issue on that is there's going to have to be an analysis made for impairment, and then that'll have to be recorded. We've talked to BDO. They said that they will waive depreciation, so we don't have to worry about that for the 3 months if we capitalize a portion of it.
And may I just ask and stop you there, what is a analysis for impairment?
For example, if $100, and these numbers aren't right, obviously, $100 was spent on getting one module up,
Mm-hmm.
but $30 of that was back 6 years ago, and it was scrapped, then that portion is an impairment, because it's a portion of the project cost that is not in use. Yeah, it would be helpful, because I talked to Joy about it, because I didn't know of any firms, and so.
Right, so the basic gist here, and even if it's not capitalized, there's a question as to whether or not the true cost you have sitting in construction in progress
Mhm.
for SAP is really the value of SAP. So it's sort of a book-only entry. You know how much you paid for it. We know how much you paid for it. I can test invoices out of the wazoo, and we know how much you paid for it. Everybody can agree on that number. But really, is it worth what you paid for it? Now, just typically when you have this long of a life cycle for the implementation of a software system, and especially with massive changes in development plans, typically the value that it has booked is not necessarily really what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can spend a lot of time and money trying to figure out what it's worth. You can go, you can hire a valuation consultant who kind of puts in some parameters about how many transactions the system's auto-calculating for you, how many users it has, how many customized modules. So there's software evaluation experts whose whole job is to look and see kind of this is the size of the program you have and what it's worth, right? And then what you would do is, you can spend a lot of money on that. Okay, I'm a taxpayer. I'm really not in the business of costing the municipality a lot of extra money. You can also do an internal analysis of that, or work with your current software vendor to work with them to figure out really what in these modules is not worth what we paid for it. Maybe we spent all that time and money on it because of the process, but really what is it worth at this point, at the time it's placed in service? All that to say, it's somewhat just an accounting nuance. Go ahead.
Excuse me. For the record, we've been joined by Assemblymember Demboski.
Great.
Thank you.
So some of that's just a nuance. The number is there, you have to pay for it, or you did pay for it. And so on the CAFR, what happens is it gets capitalized at some number and depreciated over some period of time. If you have to record a loss, it's not a loss that gets booked in the general fund. It's a loss that's really a book-only loss. It's not as if you're coming up with an additional amount of actual cash to leave the door. But accounting standards would say that you only capitalize what that system is worth, not really what you paid for it. So the impairment, in a sense, is already published, right? Everybody knows that the SAP number is very high. I don't think it, from my perspective, I don't think there's a lot of reason to fight the impairment the way it is. That being said, I don't know what the number is, so and that's on your team. Is it impaired, right, or not? I can't make that determination. You either have to come up with it internally or hire somebody to tell you. It's a lot easier for me to audit it if you hire somebody and they tell you, because then I can sort of hang my hat on that. But the other determination is, when was it placed in service? Because right now you have a big number on construction in progress, and it's the only system being used as of 10 months, right? So it's very difficult from an accounting perspective to just get through the red tape on the accounting standards to allow you to leave it in construction in progress if you're actually using it, right? It's like buying a new car and driving it around and saying, well, but I'm still also using my, not even also using my old car. It still needs to be repaired. I haven't added on the new fender. I wanted to add a few more decals onto it, or it's not functioning exactly the way I want it. They haven't installed the tow package. That may be, but you're still driving a car around and using it. You're still incurring mileage on it. And so there's kind of two different components to this. One is it in construction in progress or in capital assets, which from my perspective is a simple reclass. It's just one category of assets to another category of assets. The other question then is, what value do you have on the books? And is there a trigger for impairment? And that's where your team here is going through to evaluate whether or not an impairment might exist. And we've talked through all the accounting guidance and the GASB, the Government Accounting Standard Board guidance as to when an impairment may exist. So we're just waiting on that evaluation from your team, so we can audit it.
Okay.
But that is the biggest potential issue out there, I would say.
And we're waiting for the other people outside the controller's office still owe us information that we haven't received. Some of it has been due to departures. For example, Merrifield, they lost the manager and they lost the accountant. Some of it we just haven't received. We're waiting for completion of footnotes that others prepare. So, and then with that thing that we found out last week with the IGCs, like I said, I'm not sure how long that's going to take. I'll probably know tomorrow, I would hope. By tomorrow I'd know something. So we initially thought that we would have a draft of the CAFR to BDO by the end of this month. And then they need 4 weeks to do what they need to do with it. And as Joy was talking about, once they finish their work up here in Alaska, they send it out for external review. And that usually takes approximately a week.
Yeah, I've basically got it on the list to fast track it. Everybody nationally knows that you guys are a priority, so as soon as we have the information, actually they'll be concurrently reviewing it with us so that we cut down on that time. That being said, if somebody hands me the cash footnote and all the work papers that support it, I still have to audit it. not as if I have everything already audited at that time. So when I get the information, I have to, or my team has to audit it, then I have to review it, and then we tie it out to the CAFR. So it's just not as simple as we get the CAFR, suddenly we can turn it around and hand it to you. We actually have to audit the information that came along with the submission of the CAFR. And there are a few other things that we do. For example, we look at subsequent events, things that happened after year end. We have to update all sorts of attorney information with pretty much any attorney that helps you with any litigation claims or assessments, including your in-house. We update with internal audit as we get closer to issuance. There's just a handful of things that auditing standards require us to do. So we try to turn around our first round of edits or suggestions related to the CAFR within 2 weeks of receiving it. But all of our review process and audit won't be done the minute we get the draft.
Yes, so all in all, what I'm saying is we don't believe that we'll get the CAFR out in October. But to tail on what Joy was saying, as we have been completing work papers, we have fund accountants that complete the work papers and other accountants, and then it's forwarded to our senior financial officer. She does a review, and if she sees there needs to be a correction, she sends it back. Otherwise, she uploads it into BDO's portal, so they can be working on that part while we're still doing other work here. All the 100 funds have been uploaded except for the general fund, and that's because of this issue with IGCs. All the debt and debt work papers, our debt footnotes have been uploaded. Yeah, and some of the capital, the single audit, they have actually completed their work on that, but they can't issue it till we issue the CAFR, so it's ready to go. So we're kind of working in tandem.
The biggest areas of the outstanding, besides the kind of impairment evaluation of SAP, are the just capital assets in general. You know, once we have those, we can audit them, but there may be some additional test work that has to go into actually testing the balance itself. And then there's a few kind of SAP conversion items we're still looking at. For example, the impact of the payroll errors. So that's one of the other areas that we're still kind of hashing through, whether or not there's any sort of kind of outstanding liability, or what's the impact of those payroll errors to the municipality's financial statements. So that's one of the other main areas. We do have all of our IT documentation finished, so we actually have an IT specialist. It's worked with the Muni on your audit probably for 8 years or so, well, at least 5 years, because he's a BDO guy. So before that, it was a different person. So 5 years consistently, and with SAP, obviously there was more to do than what the conversion was for the last 4 months of the year. So we do have those findings ready to go, and just when I say findings, his evaluation of how our audit might need to be impacted by the change in SAP. And I think we've already addressed all of those on our end. We're just kind of waiting to see what the impacts related to payroll are.
Thank you for the update.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from members of Ms. Zembowski?
Thank you. I apologize for being late. And I'll go back and review the tape so I can hear the full conversation for what I missed. When we're talking about the IGC issue, can you give me a quick summation, just, 30 seconds? What's the financial impact that you're thinking?
I don't know. Last week I heard anywhere from 6 to 10 million, but until they OMB actually comes up with the uploads, we won't be able to see the numbers.
Okay. And my second question, you don't believe you'll have the draft done in October?
No, we believe we'll have the draft done in October, but they still have to do their part, so that's why it's going to November.
Okay, so you think then, I'm trying to understand the timeline, you think you'll get it over to, when do you think you're gonna turn over the draft to BDO?
I would say somewhere between mid and end October.
Okay. It would be great to have the 2017 CAFR done,
Yes. it would.
before 2019. I mean, it's very challenging from an appropriating body standpoint. I mean, we'll have the budget in front of us the first week of October, and we don't yet know what last year definitively was, and that's very problematic. Every time we talk about this, I start sweating, like seriously, because it's new territory for me. I've done this almost 6 years now, and obviously there's new circumstances, but this is challenging. So is the assembly going to be given the draft copy? Yeah, the CAFR before BDO goes through it. Because I don't know how you guys expect us to do the budget if we don't.
I would defer to Alex, if he wants to release a draft. I somewhat hesitant to do that, but I don't know that we'll have it. We're not going to have it on October 1 for you, I know that. When I say you and the assembly.
This entire process is unusual.
Yes.
And so, from a legislative standpoint, I don't see how any responsible assembly member could possibly solidify 2019 budget unless we are confident we know what we dealt with in 2017. However you guys make us confident, whether it's, granted, we probably won't even end up voting on the budget till late November, early December. So it looks like you might have a little bit of time, but I can tell you from my perspective, there's no way in this world I'm going to vote on a budget unless I have confidence. I think we've given you a lot of latitude for 2018 so far, but you have to find a way to get us some sort of solidified. You think this is what it is. That's just my perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of questions. First, to follow up though on Ms. Dombrowski's comment. So is there a way that you can give the Assembly that type of confidence without having the final full CAFR to us? Is there something else that you can do to give us that confidence?
Through the chair to Mr. Rivera, I don't feel like I can give you full confidence until they have completed their portion of the audit and have rendered an opinion.
Okay.
Because they can propose audit adjustments up to the date of the opinion.
Okay, so we just gotta wait, I guess. So specific to, I just want to understand the CAFR and why we are getting it late. So from my understanding, there are 4 main reasons here: dealing with the IGCs, dealing with the fixed assets and those reconciliations, SAP, and then this 4th one is curious to me, waiting for information from various departments. Could you detail that and why we're waiting for that?
They through the chair to Mr. Rivera, we just keep getting told that they don't have it yet. In that though, that's currently what's delaying it. There's a long list that I could go through if you wanted me to, on what caused it to be delayed to this point.
Okay, well, maybe that's something for another day, but is it normal that we would have to wait for departments to get this type of information to us so late in the game?
I would say it would not be normal.
And is this related to SAP or something else?
Well, as I was saying, for example, Merrifield lost 2 employees, and we were having problems getting a response from them.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. To follow up on that point, Ms. Clayton, do you know how many departments still owe you information? offhand?
Let's see.
We have a massive spreadsheet, and I think you're also CC'd on that spreadsheet from the audit perspective.
Mhm.
You have that.
Chair Rivera, I don't have a comprehensive list.
Maybe about 10 departments or so, would you say? Or I'm just trying to get a range of
Probably 5 or 6.
5 or 6?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Falsey, do you have any thoughts as to why some of that information is delayed beyond the Merrill Field example?
Merrill Field example, the longtime finance person at Merrill Field, but months ago, the director of Merrill Field's last day was Friday. I'm not sure that would have impacted the workflow, but this is now top of my list to follow up with Tammy as we leave this meeting. I'm happy to get the list of all the departments that are doing shakers.
And from our, if I may, from our perspective, we do, I believe weekly, at least until last week, we were doing an update just on the audit side, so that doesn't necessarily reflect what Tammy's waiting for, but from an audit perspective, what items we have. And a lot of them are very close, you know, we're just waiting on maybe one more item, or the footnote, for example, we don't have the footnote, but we do have the rest of it. And some of that is impacted by these items, so for example, cash and investments footnote is somewhat impacted by the IDCs because there's intercompany or interfund activity that happens. So until some of that stuff gets nailed down, it's hard for departments maybe to finalize things. I don't know if that helps the conversation or not. They are sort of all related to one another.
Thank you, Ms. Meredith. And clearly, we'll be addressing these issues in greater detail next week at the budget meeting. Just quickly, when it comes to fund balance, then is that estimate, which I understood to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought in the positive for 2 to 3 million or so. I mean, do we not know because of this IGC issue, or are we still good with that rough estimate?
To the chair, the estimate was revised to 1.775 million, but now with the issue with the IGCs, because that IGCs transferred revenue to the general fund. And so depending on how much that correction is, that will affect the estimate.
Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, if I remember correctly, you had said the IGCs were in the ballpark of 6 to 8 million. Is that correct?
That, through the chair to Mr. Rivera, that's what I was told last week. I asked for an update today in preparation for this meeting, and they said they didn't want to give me a number until they actually finished the update.
So, then assuming that holds, how do you imagine that will impact our fund balance?
It'll be negative for the year. So it could be, if that number that they gave me last week, if that's in the ballpark, it would be negative 2 to 8 million.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Okay, so negative 2 to 8 million, we would end 2017 in the hole.
Yes.
That's what that
And
means.
I need to make a correction. 4 to 8 million, I'm sorry.
And we may be getting too far into some of the budget issues that we're going to talk about next week. But thank you for that information. Do other members have questions, or anyone else here have questions or comments?
I just have one question. I've never really researched this, but Does this somehow, with the delay in the CAFR, does it affect our revenue sharing from the state?
You do have to send them a CAFR.
So there are potential implications there. We've had plenty of other governments be much later than that, timeframe that you're looking at, but it's probably worth having a phone call to, I believe that money comes from DCCED. So probably it does make sense for someone to reach out, and even if it's just a formal notification or request a waiver or an extension of time for funding. I don't believe that the revenue sharing payments have been made for 2019 at the state level, so we probably have to look on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Zabowski?
So following up to the administration, if, obviously we're in fiscal year 19 for the state already, right? So we've never done the CAFR, finished the CAFR for 2017. I'm assuming we got the 2018 money, or did we?
Mr. Chair, I believe so, but that would be a Lance Woolworth question. I don't perceive.
I'm looking at you, you're the city manager. So, I mean, have we contacted the state and asked for a waiver?
I have not personally contacted the state. It would either be an office management budget or CFO responsibility. I'll follow up with both of them and see if we
That's
have-
kind of a big deal, I would think.
Yes.
So I'll look forward to the answer at the budget meeting next week. Sam sweating again.
So if I may, Madam Chair,
Yes,
one
Ms.
of the
Warren.
biggest implications there is that the property tax bills include the payments received from the prior year. So that's one of their biggest compliance requirements, at least, that we look at. We didn't have any exceptions to that from last year. So presumably, anyway, the FY18 money was properly reported on your property tax bills. If that information isn't completed, obviously it would be hard for you to do that. So you can maintain compliance with community revenue sharing, certain requirements of community revenue sharing, even without a CAFR file. And I'm not certain what the reporting requirements are as it relates to an actual CAFR. It's mostly related to the single audit, would be my thought. And the reason that the single audit can't yet be released is because our opinion covers the sufficiency of the reporting of the federal awards and the state awards. And so they're all sort of linked together. If there was some sort of change to the state award schedule as a result of the CAFR audit, then suddenly your single audit becomes completely unuseful. And so we are really required, there's no requirement, but in practice there's no way to issue a single audit without the CAFR being done. But we have issued drafts of single audits in the past, and that's something we can consider. And that's something the state would have as a sticking point.
Thank you, Ms. Zabowski. Thank you, Ms. Mariner. A question to both of you, Ms. Mariner and Ms. Clayton. Are there any other areas where the city's finances could be impacted by the delayed CAFR? For example, bond rating has come up, and we've discussed the possible impact here to revenue sharing. Is there anything else beyond those two items that we should be considering?
Well, that may be a question for Alex as much as anybody. I mean, certainly the bond rating is a consideration, and that's something that you should be talking to your bond attorneys about as it relates to disclosures and reporting requirements there. The state single audit is certainly something to watch out for. The federal single audit will be also late. I've not seen any organization in Alaska have a negative impact on their grant status as a result of the late federal single audit. You know, I've seen it where a granting agency won't give them money because, you know, millions of dollars were misappropriated in federal money, but I've never seen the actual funding not come through where it's just a late process, assuming there are other findings associated with it. I'm not certain if there's any, I mean, certainly there's other implications for you as a municipality individually with, you know, MLP is something that is a priority and think, you know, just decision-making processes. But I can't think of another requirement. That doesn't mean there isn't one. There's nothing off the top of my head.
Thank you, Ms. Mariner. Mr.
To the
Slipka?
Chair, we did have a conversation actually today with one of the rating agencies, Fitch, in relation specifically to MLP. It all went fine. They expect to issue their opinion September 20th. So in that regard, and there is public notice that the CAFR is late, so, and they are aware of that.
Thank you. So you are the point of contact then, probably for, well, when it comes to talking with the bond attorneys and anything to do with our bond rating?
So we have Ross Risvold, longtime employee of the municipality, is in charge of municipal bond financer. I'm not sure what his exact title is, but he has a number of staff that work directly with him in this exact area.
Okay, thank you. Is there someone on the line?
There was.
I don't think they like your answer. Just kidding.
And if I may, Madam Chair, just one other item, and I know I've talked to the utilities about it, and they do have regulatory compliance reporting with the RCA, and I know that they're, at least they've told me they're on top of making sure that that information is getting relayed to the RCA as it relates to rate cases and those sorts of issues. So that's probably another regulatory consideration, but I do know that they're paying close attention to that.
Mr. Falsey, a question for you. So are we doing everything we can then to be on top of these issues as far as bird dogging any possible impacts of the delayed CAFR?
I hope so. And certainly internally, we are as frustrated as the Assembly is rightfully frustrated. We would love to have had the CAFR months ago from the outside of the financial column looking in. We are doing whatever we can to support their efforts to get this brought to ground, and certainly we'll follow up on the items that we discussed today.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we are adjourned.